Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled The Awakening of Orialis. The air was still, but not empty. It shimmered with a silence that hummed, as if something ancient was holding its breath beneath the surface of the world. Somewhere far from the noise of cities, tucked into the fold between forgotten hills and overgrown meadows, there was a gate, barely a structure, really, more like a frame of vine-laced stone. It stood alone at the edge of the thicket, half swallowed by roots and thyme. Ira had heard of it in whispers passed down through village tales. They called it the Whispering Gate, the threshold to Orialis, the old name for the forest no map dared name anymore. The forest that was said to remember you. She stood now in front of it, boots dusted from a long walk, a notebook tucked in her satchel, and a small silver pendant resting at her collarbone. The pendant pulsed lightly, almost imperceptibly, as though aware of the moment. "Are you really there?" she whispered to no one, brushing a hand over the moss-covered stone. A gust of wind stirred the leaves in response, as if to answer. And then it happened. Not suddenly but gradually, as if time decided to bend. The colors of the trees shifted slightly, their greens deepening, the shadows growing curious. The sound of a brook somewhere in the distance became clearer. The air turned rich with the scent of rain on old bark and blooming liana flowers. And the gate, silent for centuries, glowed with a faint, golden shimmer that laced its edges like moonlight caught in glass. Ira took a breath. And she stepped through. At first, nothing felt different. The forest looked like any other, trees rising high, vines tangling low, sunlight dripping between leaves in slow golden threads. But there was a stillness here that was not empty. It was alive. The path before her wasn't carved by any hand, no road, no markings, but her feet seemed to know where to go. Roots and rocks guided her, not hindered her. Even the air felt like it was parting gently to allow her passage. A bird called out nearby, an echoing trill that didn't belong to any species she'd heard before. She paused, turned, and caught the flash of iridescent feathers vanishing into the foliage. Her pulse quickened, not in fear, but in wonder. The forest of Orialis had begun to awaken. She walked slowly, her senses heightened. To her left, a tree bore bark shaped like runes. No human hand had carved them. They pulsed faintly, as if responding to her presence. To her right, a bush rustled, and a pair of eyes blinked out from beneath it, soft, glowing, curious. A small creature, somewhere between a fox and a rabbit, peered out, sniffed the air, and then padded away soundlessly. The deeper she walked, the more she felt it. This forest was not merely old, it was sentient. Not threatening, not wild, but aware. Then the wind shifted again. This time it carried a murmur. It wasn't the wind through leaves. It was language, Gentle, whispering, ancient. Ira froze. She tilted her head and listened. The words weren't clear, but they seemed to weave around her thoughts like threads of memory, stirring something she couldn't name. A dream she might have once had. A name she had almost forgotten. She pressed a hand to the pendant at her neck. The silver had grown warm. "You're listening too, aren't you?" she asked quietly. A squirrel darted past, leaving a trail of floating pollen in its wake, glittering like stars in daylight. Ira continued walking. Eventually, she reached a clearing. It wasn't vast, but it was perfect circular, carpeted with moss that shimmered faintly blue. At the center stood a tree unlike any other. It was tall and silver-barked, its branches shaped like reaching arms, and its leaves shimmered with multiple hues: violet, blue, gold, changing as they caught the sun. Beneath its roots was a small archway formed naturally from the way the roots had grown. Inside that arch, nestled in darkness, was a glowing orb the size of an apple. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Ira stepped closer, crouching down. The orb didn't frighten her. It called to her not physically, but emotionally. Like a feeling long lost now returning to her hands. "You're the heart of the forest, aren't you?" she whispered. The wind replied by circling the glade in a slow spiral, dancing with leaves and light. The pendant around her neck flickered. Somewhere beyond the trees, a bell-like chime rang once. Ira turned. She wasn't alone anymore. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing. Cloaked in layers of green and brown, their face hidden beneath a hood, they raised a hand not threatening, but in greeting. The figure spoke, voice soft as lichen. "You've come home, seeker of Orialis. The gate chose well." The figure stepped into the light. Though cloaked, their presence didn't stir fear in Ira. Instead, it calmed the air around her, as if the forest itself bowed to their arrival. They walked with the quiet grace of something not entirely human. The hood fell back gently as the figure reached the center of the clearing, revealing a face carved from serenity, smooth skin with a golden olive glow, eyes green like dew-touched moss, and hair braided with vines that bloomed tiny blue flowers. "I am Violan," they said, voice like wind brushing harp strings. "Caretaker of the threshold. And you are the first in a long time." Ira opened her mouth, unsure what to ask first: how they knew her, what this place truly was, or why it felt like she'd returned home to somewhere she had never been. But before words came, Violen turned toward the silver tree and gestured. "The forest remembers your kind. The pendant you wear. It bears the seal of Orialis, the first listener. It awakened a gate when your heart aligned with Orialis once more." Ira instinctively held the pendant. It pulsed gently, like the beat of her own heart. "Then this is real?" she asked, almost in disbelief. "The stories were true." Violen smiled softly. Truth does not always wear the skin of logic. But yes, Orialis lives, and it knows you. They beckoned, and Ira followed. Together, they left the clearing, taking a path hidden beneath a curtain of hanging vines. As the vines parted, Ira stepped into another world entirely. The trees here were taller ancient towers with bark of deep crimson and branches webbed in glowing threads that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Overhead, strange birds with translucent wings fluttered from canopy to canopy, leaving trails of sparkling dust. The path wound gently downward, and the ground softened underfoot, as though it welcomed each step. The forest adjusts for you, Violin explained, sensing Ira's wonder. It bends space where it must, folds distance, lets you arrive where your heart is called to go. But how is that possible? She asked. Orialis is not a place. It is a being. A dream that once rooted itself in soil and learned to breathe. As they moved deeper, the air shifted. The scent of blooming myria flowers, vines that only opened when moonlight touched them, wafted in waves. Insects of soft golden light hovered mid-air, occasionally pulsing in response to Violin's presence. And then Ira saw them. Lined along the path, peeking out from hollow trees and mossy rocks, were creatures she couldn't name. Some no taller than her knee, with luminous eyes and chittering voices, others blended into the bark or flickered like flame. One even hovered upside down from a branch, its body a swirl of silk and air. None were afraid of her. One particularly bold creature, a tiny, armored quadruped with glassy, gem-like scales, approached her, sniffed her boots, and let out a curious whistle. "He likes you," Violin said with a hint of laughter. "That's a lyrican. They guard memories buried in the roots of old trees." Ira crouched, holding out her hand. The lyrican climbed up her arm, resting near her shoulder like it belonged there. "You're really not a dream, are you?" she whispered. The lyrican chirped once in agreement. Eventually, they came upon a wide archway formed naturally by intertwining branches. The space beneath was filled with soft golden light, and within it stood a domed structure made entirely of curved bark, glowing crystals, and ivy-covered stones. "This is the listening hollow," Violin said. "A place where the forest speaks most clearly. You will rest here tonight." "But I just arrived," Ira replied. "I still have so many questions." "And you'll have many more," Violin smiled. "But questions unfold best when the heart is rested." Inside the hollow, a gentle warmth embraced her. A bed of moss shaped itself to her form. The lyrican curled beside her, already dreaming. Above, the ceiling opened slightly to reveal the dusk-kissed canopy. Stars were beginning to blink awake. As Ira's eyes fluttered closed, she heard something soft, melodic. It wasn't a voice exactly. It was the forest, singing. Singing her name. Morning in Orialis did not arrive with a burst of light. It came softly, with drifting motes of gold and the faint hush of leaves brushing against one another in conversation. Ira stirred beneath the moss-laced bedding of the listening hollow. Her body felt lighter than it had in years, untethered, as if the forest had drawn the weight from her bones during sleep. For a moment, she wasn't sure where she was. The ceiling above had opened just slightly, enough for beams of sun to trickle in through mist and vine. The scent of dew and lavender bark filled the air. She blinked up at the canopy and whispered, "I'm still here." The lyrican was curled near her head, its tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with hers. As Ira sat up, it opened one eye, chirped groggily, and stretched out its crystalline limbs before leaping onto her shoulder once more. Outside, the forest had changed. Not entirely but subtly. The paths that had led her to the hollow had shifted. The moss glowed a slightly different hue, and the wind carried a new kind of whisper. It was as if the forest had breathed again in the night and reshaped itself slightly while dreaming. Violin was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a new guide awaited. Hovering just beyond the arch of woven branches stood a creature that could not be mistaken for anything of her world. It had wings, but not of feathers, petal-like wings that shimmered with hues like stained glass in moving water. Its body was long, serpent-like, but airy and translucent, like mist wrapped in memory. It had no mouth. Yet Ira heard its voice as clearly as her own thoughts. "Come, Ira of the silver thread. The forest remembers more than names. It remembers questions never spoken." She followed it. The creature glided slowly, weaving between trunks that stretched so high they seemed to merge with the sky. The forest here was older. The trees were thicker, and the light dimmed beneath their leaves. Strange symbols pulsed on the bark glyphs that moved ever so slightly when she blinked. Ira touched one as they passed. A sudden rush of images filled her mind. A child laughing in a field of golden moss. A woman holding a small pendant and whispering a blessing. A tree, split by lightning, yet still alive. She stumbled back, gasping. The creature paused in the air. "These are echoes," it said. "Memories rooted in Orialis. Every step you take draws them forth." "But they're not mine," she whispered. "Not yet." They continued in silence. But it was a silence rich with meaning, soft rustlings, distant calls, water trickling over stone. Each sound carried weight. Each step felt guided by something beyond reason. They reached a small stream. It wasn't wide, perhaps no more than a few feet across, but its water was perfectly clear, revealing stones below etched with swirling, ancient designs. The stream didn't gurgle or rush. It hummed. A deep, musical tone like a lullaby from the earth itself. The creature hovered above the water. "Cross here, and you will see." As she stepped into the stream, the hum deepened. The water wasn't cold. In fact, it was warm, gently tugging at her ankles like a comforting hand. The moment she reached the middle of the stream, the world tilted. Not physically but in sensation. The air thickened. The trees around her stretched and pulled back like curtains. And before her, standing not 5 feet away, was a girl. Herself. But younger. Ira stared. The girl stood barefoot, eyes wide, clutching something tightly in her small hand, the pendant. And then the girl spoke not aloud, but in Ira's mind. You promised you wouldn't forget. Ira reached out, but the image shimmered. Behind the girl, shapes moved. A village. Her parents. A night beneath stars where her mother told stories about Orialis, about how it wasn't just myth, but memory. About how Ira's lineage came from the listeners, those who heard the forest when it truly spoke. She had forgotten. Until now. The image of the child vanished like mist in sunlight. Ira stood alone in the stream. The creature circled her slowly, its wings casting shifting colors across the water. Now you remember the thread. The promise. And the wound. What wound? She asked, throat tightening. But the creature only turned, and began to drift away once more. She followed. They arrived at a place unlike any she had seen. A hollow basin, sunken slightly below the forest floor, surrounded by trees bent inward in a perfect circle. In the center stood a giant stump, not rotting, but pulsing faintly with light. Roots spread from it like veins, reaching far into the distance. The heart root, said the creature. Ira approached slowly. As she neared it, her pendant began to glow again. And the stump responded. Threads of golden light rose from the wood, curling into the air like memory smoke. Within it, she saw moments. Her first drawing. Her father's voice. The thunderstorm that frightened her. The dream where she flew with glowing birds. The sadness she never spoke of. All of it stored. Remembered. Alive. The forest holds what we forget. Ira knelt beside the stump and pressed her palm to its surface. In that moment, she felt it all. The grief. The wonder. The joy. The parts of herself she had buried in growing up. And in that touch, something passed between her and Orialis. Recognition. You are more than a seeker now, the creature said softly. You are a rememberer. The trees around her exhaled. A wind rose, not fierce but filled with motion, carrying seeds, scents, and silent songs. The lyrican returned, bounding from the underbrush, chirping excitedly. Ira turned her face upward. The forest no longer felt strange. It felt like her. The canopy above was no longer silent. It thrummed. Not with noise, but with rhythm. A pulse. A beat. as if the forest had a heartbeat, and now after Ira's awakening it beat just slightly louder. The lyrican on her shoulder twitched, chirped twice, and leapt to the ground, running ahead. Ira followed, her boots whispering over soft moss, past trees that seemed to lean slightly as she passed. She was being guided again, but this time, not by a silent forest. By something calling. It was a tug, not physical, not magical, but emotional. Like remembering a name you hadn't spoken in years. The deeper she walked, the more it grew. And then the path split. She stopped. Before her, the trail divided into two. To the left, a shaded corridor of vines, woven so tightly overhead that only slivers of emerald light danced below. The air was still there, heavy with the scent of something floral and sweet, but faintly off. Like memory that had been locked away too long. To the right, a winding climb up a hill bathed in soft golden haze. Petals fell lazily from unseen blooms above. The breeze there whispered with laughter, familiar and bright. But neither path bore signs. No markings. No words. Only silence. And choice. Ira hesitated. "You won't find signs," came a voice behind her. She turned quickly, hand on her pendant, only to find violins stepping out from behind a tree. Their green and vine cloak shimmered with morning dew. A large moth clung to their shoulder like a sentry. "Just you," Violin continued. "And what you're willing to hear." Ira gestured to the fork. "Which way leads to the truth?" Violin tilted their head, expression unreadable. "Both do," they said. "And neither." "That's not helpful." "It wasn't meant to be." Ira exhaled, stepping between the two paths, heart thudding. "Each path leads to a part of your memory," Violin finally said, softer now. "One path reawakens what you once loved and lost. The other, what you feared and forgot." Ira looked between the two again. Her eyes landed on the left path, the one wrapped in shadows. The one that seemed older. Sealed. "I'll go left," she said, voice steady. Violin nodded once. "Then be warned. The deeper you go, the more the forest will ask of you. Not your strength. Not your magic. But your memory. The truest kind of magic." She stepped forward. The vines closed behind her. The path narrowed quickly. Roots twisted like old hands across her footing. Every breath felt thicker here, drenched in dampness and the scent of rain-soaked earth. The lyrican paused, uncertain, and let her take the lead. Soon the light faded almost entirely. But she could still see, thanks to the trees themselves. Tiny mushrooms lined the path, casting a soft teal glow. The trees' veins pulsed with faint green light, like circuits alive beneath bark. The forest here wasn't dead, it was dreaming. and not kindly. She passed a tree whose trunk had grown into a twisted spiral. Within its curl sat a hollow, and inside that hollow glowed a single eye. It blinked. Ira quickened her pace. Then she saw it. A circle of stone markers, worn smooth with age but each carved with sigils matching those from the heartroot. In the center of the circle, a pedestal made of the same silver-barked wood as the tree in her first clearing. On it sat an object wrapped in dried vines. She approached slowly. The moment she stepped into the circle, the air dropped 10 degrees. Wind swirled from nowhere. Leaves rustled like voices behind thin walls. The lyrican hissed once and hid behind her boot. Ira reached out. As her fingers brushed the vines, they recoiled, unwrapping with a shriveled gasp. Beneath them was a mirror. Not a perfect one. The glass shimmered like still water under moonlight, and as she looked in, she didn't see her reflection. She saw a memory. A door. A hand, her own, closing that door on someone crying. A voice pleading, "Don't forget me." A scream swallowed by thunder. And then darkness. Ira stumbled back. Her hand shook. The lyrican crept beside her, nudging her ankle. "You shut that door," the forest whispered. "Now will you open it?" She turned back toward the mirror. The image shifted. The same door. Closed. But this time, a single key hung beside it, made of roots, leaves, and glowing crystal. And the key was now pulsing in her palm. She hadn't even noticed holding it. The mirror dissolved into mist, curling around her like fog. The pedestal cracked open, and from within rose a new item, a seed. Glossy, gold-veined, warm to the touch. "The memory seed," said Violen's voice, though they were nowhere in sight. "Only one who has faced the locked chamber of regret can carry it." Ira clenched her fist around it, heart pounding. The vines around the path loosened, and a new trail opened to her left, previously hidden. She turned to follow it, but paused. The air around her no longer thrummed. It sang. A slow, rising melody, not from any one direction, but from the roots, the wind, the seed in her hand. It was the forest welcoming her back from the threshold of silence. As she emerged from the dark path, light spilled over her again. The golden haze of the right-hand trail now welcomed her, not as an option, but as the next chapter. Ira stepped forward, not as a visitor, not as a lost girl, but as the seeker who remembered, and who would soon learn what it truly meant to listen. Ira stepped forward, the seed in her palm glowing with soft, pulsing warmth. The forest had changed again. No longer cloaked in the weight of shadowed memory, the path now glistened with dew-kissed light. Leaves sparkled faintly as if spun from threadbare stars, and the trunks of trees shimmered with soft golden dust like pollen captured in morning beams. Birdsong returned, not just as sound, but as melody. Harmonies floated through the canopy, weaving in and out of each other like living threads of music. And then she saw it. A glade. Circular. Sacred. At its center, a shallow pool no wider than a cottage's roof, ringed by stones etched in spirals and lines like veins of an ancient heart. The water shimmered not blue or clear, but prismatic, like the surface of a bubble frozen in time. It hummed faintly, not in volume but in vibration, like the inside of a memory you were about to remember. This was it. The Grove of Return. She approached slowly, the lyrican still padding beside her. The small creature made no sound, but it gazed at the pool with something like reverence. Across from her, a figure waited. Not violin. This one was cloaked in robes made entirely of wind and shadow, impossible to focus on, yet not threatening. Their face was a blur, like mist caught in motion. But their voice, when they spoke, was solid and ancient. Do you carry the seed? Ira held it up. Then return what you took. She didn't understand the words at first. But the forest did. And so did the seed. As Ira stepped closer to the pool's edge, her pendant grew hot against her chest. She knelt down, opened her hand, and gently lowered the memory seed into the water. The moment it touched the surface, the pool transformed. Color exploded across it, rippling rings of violet, green, gold, and silver like memories unfolding. The seed sank slowly, and as it did, images bloomed on the surface of the water. A young Ira drawing strange spirals on a wall in her childhood home. Her mother whispering lullabies about the woods that listened. Her running through a storm, clutching the pendant. A memory long lost, her twin brother, laughing beside her, vanishing behind a tree she never found again. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't forget, she whispered. I just closed the door. The cloaked figure knelt across the pool. But the door was never locked. Only hidden. The pool began to rise not as water, but as light. A column of memory, glowing, lifting the seed upward as though giving it back, now transformed. It was no longer just a seed. It was a luminous sprout, a small, root-wrapped crystal heart, beating with life. The earth parted slightly in the center of the glade. A nest of roots opened. Ira understood. She stepped forward and gently planted the luminous sprout into the hollow. As soon as it touched the soil, roots spiraled out in every direction like veins returning to a heart that had waited for them. The ground shivered. The pool glowed white hot for a moment, then stilled into perfect clarity. And slowly, where once there had been only old roots and forgotten stone, a tree began to grow. It was unlike anything in Orialis. Its bark was not brown but pearl white with threads of silver. Its leaves unfurled like wings, iridescent and translucent, catching colors that danced and shifted with every blink. It grew fast, time bent around it like breath held and released. Within minutes, it stood tall, radiant. And within its trunk, carved naturally, a sigil appeared. Ira stepped close. The sigil glowed. It was her name. No, not just her name. It was her true name. The one she had forgotten even before she knew how to speak. She reached out and touched the sigil. The air around the glade changed. From every direction, animals emerged. Not threatening, not afraid. They came with purpose. Deer with mirrored eyes. Owls with feathers like pages of books. Foxes with tails that shimmered like fireflies. Even the trees bent closer. And Violin appeared, standing beneath the new tree. You have done what many feared to try, they said. You've planted a memory, instead of just remembering one. Orialis will never forget you now. Ira stepped back, eyes wide, overwhelmed by the moment. But what does it mean? Violin smiled. It means the forest trusts you. And now, it will show you what lies deeper. A single petal fell from the new tree. When it touched the ground, it turned into a path one lined with glowing stones that had not existed before. A hidden path. One only opened through memory, not map. Ira looked ahead. This path curved away into darkness, but not the kind she feared. This was the darkness of possibility. Of hidden truth. Of what the forest had kept secret, not to protect itself, but to protect her. The lyrican chirped and leapt onto her shoulder again, its tiny body warm with pride. She turned to Violin one last time. Where does this lead? To what was forgotten, even by the forest itself. And without looking back, Ira stepped into the new path. The forest whispered. It was no longer the light hum of a distant memory, but something urgent pressing, like a breath held too long. Ira stood at the edge of the new path, staring into the dense shadows ahead. The glowing stones that marked her way pulsed with a soft rhythm, lighting the way forward, but every step she took felt as though the earth beneath her was shifting, preparing for something deep within to awaken. The lyrican perched on her shoulder, its tiny body warm, chirping a few times, an echo of excitement, but also weariness. She understood. The further she went, the darker it became. The trees, while still alive and vibrant, seemed quieter. Their leaves no longer shimmered with the usual golds and blues, but instead, the colors were muted earth tones, with a faint, dull glow, like ancient embers that had long since burned out but still carried a memory of heat. The stones beneath her feet began to darken too, shifting from glowing white to a deep purple. A subtle glow pulsed from them, like the beat of a distant heart, but it wasn't steady. It was erratic, skipping, stuttering like a dying flame. Ira couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something forgotten, something deliberately hidden, locked away from the world for reasons even Orialis itself had not yet revealed. As she moved deeper, she began to notice the air grow heavier. It was as if every breath she took was soaked with ancient time, filled with the residue of forgotten stories. The silence around her stretched, almost suffocating, as if the very forest was holding its breath. At last, she came to a clearing. A wide, sunken valley, the floor of which was covered with thick moss and twisted roots. The stone path she followed ended abruptly at the edge of a deep chasm, and before her lay a vast expanse of trees that seemed to reach towards the sky with twisted, contorted limbs. The air was colder here. It was not just the temperature, it was something in the atmosphere. A damp chill that had settled long ago, and perhaps, had never left. The sky above was clouded, but not with rain. The clouds hung low, dark like a weight too heavy to lift. And then, as if summoned by her presence, the ground began to hum again. This time, it was not just the ground. The entire valley trembled. A deep vibration thrummed through the earth, a low hum that reverberated in her bones. The trees seemed to groan as they bent and twisted, their roots straining, as though something beneath them was awakening something that had been buried for a long time. Suddenly, a figure stepped forward from the mist. A man, or something that looked like a man. His body was tall and thin, his face obscured by a hood woven from shadows, his hands glowing with the same pulsing energy that Ira had seen in the heartroot tree. "The Vale remembers," the figure said, his voice an echo of ancient winds, his words coming not just from his mouth but from the earth itself. Ira felt her heart skip. You're one of the keepers, aren't you?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "I am the last," the figure said. "I guard what was lost, what was hidden, what was sealed away." The figure stepped closer, and with each movement, the valley around them seemed to grow stiller, quieter. The glow from the stone path now faded into a soft gray, barely visible beneath the dark canopy of twisted trees. "You are the seeker of memory," the figure continued, his voice softening. "And you have come to open the door that was never meant to be unlocked." Ira frowned, glancing around. The air felt thick, the memories of Orialis swirling around her. It felt like she was standing on the precipice of something both ancient and new. "What door?" she asked. "The door to the Forgotten Vale," the figure replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. "It holds not just memory, but the roots of what the forest itself was built upon. What it has always protected." Ira stepped forward, feeling the pull of the ground beneath her feet. She was closer to something, closer to the very heart of Orialis, than she had ever been before. But something was wrong. The forest was shifting, twisting in a way that didn't feel natural. "You must choose, Seeker." The figure's voice echoed. "Choose to open the door, and the forest will show you the truth of its creation, of its pain, of its sacrifice. Choose not to open it, and Orialis will remain hidden from you forever." Ira took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her. She thought back to the memories she had seen in the luminous sprout images of her mother, her brother, the stories told by the trees, and the ancient words spoken by the heartroot. She remembered the door she had shut. And she knew that the forest, the world, everything had been waiting for her to open it. She stepped forward. The moment she crossed the threshold into the valley, the world around her exploded with light. The trees groaned, their twisted limbs stretching higher, their roots breaking apart the earth beneath them. The ground cracked open, and from it rose the door, a massive archway of roots, stone, and wood, glowing with the same energy that pulsed through the heartroot. For the first time, Ira could feel the weight of the secrets held within. She raised her hand, touching the door. The moment her fingers made contact, a wave of memory flooded her. It was like being submerged in a sea of visions. Everything rushed forward. The Forgotten Vale, a place untouched by time. The origin of Orialis itself, a memory buried deep within the forest's heart. The truth about why Orialis had always kept its secrets hidden. Ira gasped, staggering back. And then she understood. The forest wasn't just alive. It was alive. But it was also alive with memory from before time. From a world that had once been lost and had been reborn in the form of Orialis. And now, she was the one who had been called to hear it. The memory. The truth. And the price. The light from the door pulsed in time with her heartbeat, a steady thrum that filled Ira's chest, her limbs, her very being. The archway in front of her stretched like a living thing, its roots twisting and curling, expanding with each beat of the pulse. The glow from the energy that pulsed through the arch seemed to swallow the very air. Ira felt the weight of Orialis pressing against her, its deep, ancient roots, and the countless memories woven into its being. But beneath all that, there was a quiet cry. Not of pain, not of sorrow, but of loneliness. She reached out again, her hand trembling, and as her fingers brushed against the glowing roots of the door, the ground trembled beneath her feet. The memory flooded. The air grew thick with the echoes of a distant past, voices long forgotten. She heard the sound of rain, of voices calling through the forest, the crackle of firewood in an ancient hearth. And then, a voice familiar, but distant. You are the one, Ira. You are the one who can save this place, who can remember what has been forgotten. Ira's breath caught in her throat. She recognized that voice. It was hers. The vision before her blurred, shifting like fog over a lake, and the landscape around her melted away. The trees of Orialis, the winding paths, the gentle light, all of it vanished into the swirling depths of the past. She was no longer standing in the valley. She was somewhere else, someone else. She was in a forest, just like this one but different. The trees were younger, their trunks thinner, their branches softer. There were no glowing mushrooms, no bioluminescent light. Just the cold, hard soil and the faint scent of pine. And she wasn't alone. The figures around her were shadows, people whose faces she could almost make out but couldn't quite touch. They moved with purpose, gathering around a massive tree that stood taller than any she had ever seen. Its bark was silver white, like the one in the heartroot, but it pulsed with a dull, almost sorrowful light. One of the figures, a woman, stepped forward, her face shrouded in shadow. She reached out toward the great tree. We have to stop it. We have to seal it away before it spreads. Her voice was a low whisper, barely audible. The air around her seemed to hum in agreement, as if the trees themselves were listening, waiting. Ira took a step closer, drawn to the woman. There was something about her energy, her presence that was so familiar. But it wasn't just the woman. It was everything around her, the trees, the sky, the land itself. This was Orialis. Or, rather, before Orialis. This was the beginning. The woman turned then, her face still veiled in shadow, but her eyes, Ira saw her eyes brilliant and intense, locked onto hers. The woman reached toward her, as if pulling her into the vision. You must understand, Ira. You must know why this must happen. Why it has to be sealed away. The forest was born from pain, from sorrow. It was meant to be a place of healing, but it became something more, something dangerous. A flash of memory surged in Ira's mind. The woman's voice seemed to call to her. Her name. It danced on the edge of her memory but refused to be captured. But it was there. Somewhere deep. Somewhere she knew. It was never meant to be. The woman's voice cracked, almost mournfully. And neither were you. Ira stumbled backward, gasping for breath as the vision faded. The ground beneath her trembled again, and the pulsating light from the door dimmed. The trees around her creaked in protest. The valley shifted. The truth, seeker, is not always kind. The voice from the past echoed through the valley, swirling around her. But it is necessary. Ira turned back toward the glowing archway, the door to the forgotten vale still standing tall in front of her. Her hands shook, her heart racing. She had just seen the birth of Orialis, or at least, the beginning of its transformation. She had seen the forest before it was lost to time. And she had seen the truth that lay beneath it all. The ground beneath her feet trembled once more, but this time, it was different. The roots of the trees around her began to rise, shifting and moving as if they were alive. From the depths of the valley, something began to stir. The keeper appeared once more, emerging from the mist that swirled around the trees. This time, their form was clearer. The shadows that had hidden their face now receded. The keeper stepped forward, and their face this time was fully revealed. It was a face Ira recognized. It was herself. The keeper smiled, a soft, melancholic smile that held the weight of centuries. They reached out toward her, and Ira stepped back, her heart racing. You are the one who was chosen, the keeper said. Chosen to protect the memories of Orialis and to decide its future. But the past will never let you go. It has already claimed you. Ira's voice caught in her throat. I don't understand. The keeper's eyes softened. You were born here, Ira. The forest chose you. just as it chose your twin. The words struck her like a bolt of lightning. She froze, every ounce of her being locking in place. Her twin. The figure before her, this keeper, was her. Was this what she had forgotten? Was this the truth buried deep inside her? Her twin. Her brother. The one who had vanished. The one she had thought lost forever. The keeper's face grew serious. The forest's truth is a burden, seeker. To protect it, you must face what you lost. You must remember him, and choose whether Orialis will live or die with that truth. Ira stood frozen, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Her mind swirled with questions, with images of her twin brother, his laughter, his face, everything she had lost. Everything Orialis had hidden. And now, it was all coming back. The forest had not just chosen her. It had chosen her for a reason. And that reason, she now knew, would change everything. Ira stood at the edge of the valley, her heart racing. Her brother's name echoed in her mind, a ghost of a memory long buried. She hadn't thought of him in years, not until now, not until the forest had shown her what she had forgotten. The keeper, the figure before her, who was, in a strange way, her reflection, still stood in the shadows of the trees. Their eyes, those familiar eyes, locked onto hers, as though waiting for a response, a decision. Her brother. It had been so long. Ira could barely remember his face now, but the memory was there, buried deep, hidden beneath layers of other lives, other moments. The forest had buried it, and she had forgotten. But now, it all came back in a rush. Her twin, who had disappeared in the storm when they were children. The storm that had ripped through their village, the storm that had torn them apart. And now the forest, Orialis, had returned him to her through her memories, through its roots, through its pain. You were born here, Ira. The forest chose you to carry its burden, the keeper's voice echoed again, softer now, almost like a whisper. You must decide whether Orialis will remain in the past, or whether it will move forward with its truth. Ira closed her eyes for a moment. The weight of the decision pressed on her chest. The forest, this ancient, living being, had carried its pain for centuries. It had hidden the truth of what had happened to her twin, to her family, to the very heart of Orialis itself. And now, it was asking her to choose its fate. A soft breeze stirred the leaves, and the trees around her whispered. It wasn't a sound she had heard before. It was as if the forest itself was listening, waiting for her response. The roots beneath her feet seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat, as if the land itself was alive and aware. Her hand instinctively went to the pendant around her neck, the pendant that had begun this journey, the pendant that had carried her to this point. It pulsed with a gentle warmth, a reminder of the power she now carried, the power to make this choice, to shape the future of Orialis. Orialis has always been more than a forest, the keeper continued, their voice growing firmer. It is a place of memory, of loss, and of rebirth. The truth must be faced. You cannot undo what has been done, but you can choose to let it go, or to carry it forward. The keeper stepped closer, their form shimmering like mist, their presence both comforting and unnerving at the same time. Their eyes, Ira's eyes, held a depth of knowledge that she could feel stirring within her own soul. If you open the door, if you allow the forest to remember everything, it will be reborn. But the cost will be high. Orialis will know what it has lost, and the balance of the world will shift. Ira swallowed hard. She could feel the weight of the decision settling deep in her bones. The forest had kept its secrets for centuries, and she was the one who would choose whether to break its silence. The wind picked up again, and the trees swayed, their branches creaking like the whispers of forgotten souls. The lyrican, still perched on her shoulder, chirped nervously, its tiny body trembling as it sensed the growing tension in the air. Ira turned toward the valley, her gaze falling on the tree she had planted, the luminous sprout. It had grown into a magnificent tree, its branches stretching high into the sky, its leaves shimmering with an iridescent glow. But even it seemed uncertain, as if it was waiting for her decision. She took a step forward, her boots crunching on the soft ground. The path ahead was clear, yet the forest was filled with unseen branches, unknown twists, and memories that had been hidden for too long. Ira closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She thought of her twin. She thought of the life she had once known, of the promises she had made and the ones she had broken. The memories came flooding back, like waves crashing on the shore. Her mother's voice, her brother's laughter, the storm that had torn their world apart. The forest had been the keeper of these memories, but now it was her turn to decide what to do with them. Choose, Ira, the keeper's voice came again, more urgent now. Choose whether to bring the past back, or to let it rest. The roots of Orialis will remember, no matter what. Ira's fingers tightened around the pendant. She felt its warmth, its power, and the connection to the forest, to the memory of what had been. With a final, steadying breath, Ira made her choice. I choose to remember, she whispered. The moment the words left her lips, the ground beneath her feet rumbled. The roots of the lumina tree surged upward, twisting and writhing as though the very earth was waking from a long slumber. The valley trembled, and the sky above her crackled with energy. The air grew thick with the force of it all, and a bright, blinding light erupted from the tree. The sound of ancient voices from the past rushed through the air, like a river breaking free from its dam. Ira's vision blurred as the world around her exploded with light, sound, and memories of the forest, of her brother, of her family. The truth of Orialis unfurled before her eyes, and she saw it all: the pain, the loss, the rebirth, and the sacrifice. She saw her twin, standing beside her, smiling, the storm raging around them. And then she saw him fall, swallowed by the forest, lost in the depths of Orialis. The forest had taken him, hidden him, because it was afraid. Afraid of losing what it had built. Afraid of the truth. As the light began to fade, Ira found herself standing in the center of the valley, the tree now fully grown, its roots stretching deep into the earth. The ground beneath her feet had settled, and the air was still once more. The keeper stood before her, their expression unreadable. "You have chosen the path of truth," they said, their voice softer now. "And with that, Orialis will be reborn. But remember, seeker, some truths come at a price. And the price of memory is never light." Iroh looked up at the tree, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. She had opened the door, and the truth had flooded in. There would be no going back. But she knew now, more than ever, that she was ready to face whatever came next. Because Orialis had chosen her. And now, it was time for her to choose it back. The forest was never the same again. Iroh stood in the center of the forgotten vale, feeling the weight of what she had done. The Lumina tree, now fully grown, shimmered with an energy that seemed to hum with life, its roots stretching deep into the earth, its leaves pulsing with the memories it had unlocked. The very air felt different, thicker, alive with the resonance of ancient truths. And though the silence that followed the explosion of light was calming, it was also unsettling. Orialis had changed. She took a step forward, her boots crunching against the moss-covered ground. The Lyrican, which had perched on her shoulder since the beginning of her journey, hopped down and began to scurry along the newly formed roots of the Lumina tree, chirping excitedly as if to signal that something else was coming. The valley had settled, but the forest was still shifting. The trees around her groaned softly as if waking from a long, deep sleep. And in the distance, the wind carried strange sounds, echoes of the past, whispers that seemed to beckon her. Iroh stepped toward the edge of the vale, her eyes scanning the landscape. The path that had once been hidden, the one that led deeper into the heart of Orialis, was now open. It stretched before her, a ribbon of stone, glistening with energy. The roots of the Lumina tree seemed to reach out toward it, urging her to follow. She took a deep breath. The truth was out now. Orialis had remembered. As Iroh walked along the path, the forest around her seemed to grow more vibrant with each step. The trees, which had once seemed stoic and ancient, now exhaled energy. The ground beneath her feet seemed to hum with the beat of a heart long forgotten. But as the path wound deeper, she began to feel something more than just the pulse of the land. She felt eyes. Eyes watching from the shadows, from the canopies high above. Iroh froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the pendant at her chest. The forest was not just remembering, it was alive, aware. She could feel its presence, as if the trees, the roots, the very earth had become sentient, conscious of her every move. The Lyrican's excited chirp suddenly stopped, and it hopped up onto her shoulder, sensing the change in the air. Then, without warning, the forest spoke. "You have awoken us," a deep, resonant voice echoed through the trees. "You have brought us back to life. But what will you do with it?" The voice came not from any one place, but from everywhere. It reverberated through the trunks of the trees, the air, the very earth beneath her. It was as if the forest itself had grown a voice, and now it was asking her a question. Ira's heart raced, and she glanced around, but there was no one to be seen. Only the trees, their leaves whispering in the wind. I don't understand, she whispered. You will, the voice replied. But the truth is not a gift without its price. The ground beneath her shifted. Roots surged up from the earth, twisting like serpents, coiling around the stones that lined the path. The air turned heavy, and the atmosphere thickened, as though the forest itself was preparing for something. The lumina tree pulsed with light, sending beams of energy into the sky, which began to crack open with strange, swirling clouds. It was as if Orialis was opening itself to something greater or something darker. Ira stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. Orialis remembers the past, the voice continued, its tone sorrowful. But it remembers the cost of that past as well. You have unlocked the truth, but now the balance must be restored. Restore. Ira repeated, her mind racing. What balance? The forest has always been tied to memory, the voice said. But memory is a living thing, not a static record. If you have released it, you must now carry it forward. What happens next is your responsibility. The trees around her began to twist and shift, as if the forest itself was reacting to the voice. The branches bent, the roots thrashed against the ground, and the light from the lumina tree grew brighter, filling the entire valley with a blinding radiance. And then, like a sudden storm, everything went still. The silence that followed was absolute. Ira stood frozen, unable to move. The air felt thick, dense with the weight of expectation. The lyrican nestled tightly against her neck, sensing the tension in the air. You are not just a seeker, Ira, the voice said, quieter now, almost tender. You are a keeper, just as your twin once was. And like him, you carry the weight of Orialis' memory. The forest will not let you go. The words hit her like a tidal wave. Her twin. The keeper. Her brother. Everything was starting to make sense, and yet, it didn't. What happened to him? Ira demanded, her voice cracking. There was a pause, and then the voice responded, heavy with the weight of centuries. He made a choice, just as you must now. He chose to protect the forest from the truth, to keep Orialis hidden from the world. But in doing so, he sealed his fate. And yours, too. The forest began to move again, its voice rising with the energy that swirled around them. The branches above her seemed to bend toward her, and the ground beneath her feet rumbled with power. The past cannot be undone, Ira, the voice said, its tone now clear, resolute. But the future can still be shaped. Choose wisely. For the forest will live or die by your decision. The ground beneath her feet shook violently. A crack appeared in the earth, splitting the path in two. Ira looked up at the trees, the glowing lumina tree standing tall above them all. She could feel its energy pulsing, its roots stretching deep into the earth, entwining with the forest's very heart. She could feel the weight of its memory, the truth of everything Orialis had experienced, and the burden it now placed upon her shoulders. It was up to her to choose. The future of Orialis, of her brother, of herself, depended on the decision she would make. Ira stood in the heart of the valley, her feet rooted to the ground, her breath catching in her throat. The crack in the earth had widened, revealing an abyss beneath her feet, an endless chasm that seemed to draw in the very light around it. The trees around her creaked as the wind picked up, bending under the weight of the decision she was about to make. The forest had spoken. Orialis had remembered. But now, the forest was waiting for her. Waiting for her to choose. The path ahead was unclear. To the left, the valley seemed to deepen, leading further into the forest, where the trees became darker, their trunks twisted and gnarled. To the right, the forest opened into a clearing bathed in golden light, where the lumina tree stood tall, its roots still pulsing with the energy of the memory it had unlocked. Ira felt the pull of both directions. The valley to the left felt like a path of sorrow, the weight of the past pressing down on it, but also the possibility of healing. The light to the right felt like hope, but it was a fragile hope, one that could easily be extinguished if the truth was not accepted. Her brother. Her twin. The one who had disappeared. The one who had left her behind. He had chosen the path of secrecy. The path of keeping Orialis hidden from the world. But in doing so, he had sealed his own fate, and the fate of the forest. And now, it was her turn to choose. The voice of the keeper echoed in her mind. The forest has always been tied to memory. But memory is a living thing, not a static record. If you have released it, you must now carry it forward. Ira closed her eyes. She could feel the weight of the truth pressing on her chest, the responsibility that had been placed upon her. The forest had given her the choice to open the door to the past, to remember what had been forgotten. But now, she had to decide what to do with that truth. Would she follow in her brother's footsteps and keep the secrets of Orialis hidden, protecting it from the world? Or would she face the truth, knowing that the consequences of that decision could change everything? The Lyrican, perched on her shoulder, chirped nervously, sensing her indecision. Ira reached up and stroked its small, warm body, grateful for its silent support. The little creature had been with her since the beginning of her journey, guiding her through the unknown, offering companionship in the silence of the forest. But now, it was her turn to make the choice. Her hand instinctively went to the pendant around her neck. The silver glowed softly in the dim light of the valley, a reminder of the bond she shared with the forest. The pendant pulsed with warmth, as if urging her forward, as if the forest itself was waiting for her to take the next step. The trees around her began to shift again. Their branches reached toward her, as if trying to guide her in one direction or another. The air grew thick with energy, charged with the weight of the decision. She could feel the forest alive, aware, waiting. Choose, seeker, the voice of Orialis echoed once more. Choose the truth, or choose silence. The forest will live or die by your decision. Ira closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. She thought back to everything she had learned, everything she had seen. The memories of her twin, the stories of the forest, the truth of Orialis' creation and its purpose. She could feel the ancient power of the forest in her bones, the weight of its history in her veins. But most of all, she felt the pull of her own heart. I choose, Ira whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. I choose the truth. The moment the words left her lips, the forest erupted. The earth shook beneath her feet, the trees around her groaning as if in response to her decision. The air crackled with energy, and the sky above her split open, a beam of light shining down onto the lumina tree. The roots of the tree stretched deeper into the earth, as if drawing the very energy of the world itself, and the ground trembled as the memories of Orialis were unleashed once more. Ira stumbled, feeling the force of the transformation surge through her, her body awash with power. The memories of the forest, the pain, the loss, the rebirth rushed through her like a torrent, each moment, each image, crashing into her consciousness. She saw her twin once more, his face, his smile, the storm that had torn them apart. She saw the moment he disappeared, lost to the forest, hidden away in the depths of Orialis. She saw the truth of his choice, and the price he had paid for it. But she also saw something else. The lumina tree, now glowing brighter than ever, began to shift. Its roots, once still, now moved with purpose, carving a path through the earth. And as the tree grew taller, the branches stretching into the sky, Ira saw what had been hidden beneath it all. A new path. A path to the heart of Orialis. The voice of the keeper echoed once more, this time filled with a sense of finality. The truth is now set free, they said. The forest will remember. And you, seeker, will carry its memory into the world. Ira looked at the path that had opened before her, her heart pounding in her chest. She had made her choice. The forest had remembered, and now it was time for her to decide what would come next. Would she return to the world beyond Orialis, carrying the truth with her? Or would she remain here, in the heart of the forest, where the memory of her twin and the memory of Orialis could continue to live? The choice was hers. With one final glance at the lumina tree, Ira took a step forward, her foot landing on the new path that had been revealed. The forest, once again, hummed with life, as though it was waking from a deep slumber. The memory of the past, the truth of Orialis, and the future of the forest were now in her hands. Ira, the seeker, had made her choice. And Orialis would live on. The earth beneath Ira's feet was still trembling. The energy that surged through Orialis, the energy of truth, of memory, was alive, pulsating through the roots, through the very air. The valley around her had shifted. The trees, which had once stood like silent sentinels, were now reaching out, their branches swaying as if in welcome or perhaps in warning. The lumina tree, now fully grown and radiant, stood tall, its roots weaving deep into the earth, connecting the very soul of the forest to the world beyond. Its light flickered like a heartbeat, illuminating the shadows that lingered at the edge of the clearing. But there was no comfort in that light. There was no certainty in the calm that had followed the storm. Ira stood still, her mind racing. The choice she had made was not without consequence. Orialis had been awakened, but now, what would it mean? What would happen to her? To the forest? To everything she had ever known? The lyrican, still perched on her shoulder, chirped softly, nuzzling against her neck as if offering some comfort. Ira reached up to stroke its tiny head, feeling the weight of the decision she had made settle heavy in her chest. She glanced back at the lumina tree. The light that radiated from it was warm, inviting, but it felt like the light of an old, dying star. It was too bright, too intense, and yet, there was something comforting in its warmth. The tree pulsed with life, but it also pulsed with memory, a memory of things lost, things forgotten, and things that should have stayed buried. You have opened the door, Ira, the voice of Orialis echoed in her mind, deep and ancient, resonating like the hum of the earth itself. Now you must walk the path that has been laid before you. But be warned, there is no turning back. Ira closed her eyes. She could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on her, as if the trees themselves were leaning in to watch her, to judge her. Orialis had given her the truth, but now the question was, what would she do with it? She had chosen the path of memory, of truth, but what if that truth was too much to bear? The valley seemed to hold its breath. Then, as if in response to her thoughts, the ground beneath her shifted. The earth cracked open again, but this time it was not a chasm, it was a gateway. The roots of the lumina tree stretched outward, curling around the earth, twisting and weaving like veins that pulsed with power. The gateway opened, revealing a new path, one that led deeper into the heart of Orialis. The forest has shown you what it was, the voice said. Now it will show you what it can become. But remember, every change carries its price. Ira hesitated. She had already chosen to embrace the truth, to allow Orialis to remember, but this new path. It felt different. It felt like an invitation to something beyond what she had imagined. Something that could either heal the forest or destroy it. With a deep breath, Ira stepped forward, the weight of her decision settling around her like a cloak. The lyrican, sensing the shift, darted off her shoulder and ahead, chirping excitedly as it led the way. Ira followed, the ground beneath her feet softening as the path ahead grew brighter. The further she walked, the more the forest seemed to change. The air grew lighter, the trees taller, their trunks glowing faintly with the energy that pulsed through them. The roots beneath her feet seemed to hum with life, reaching out toward her as though they were trying to guide her forward. The entire forest was alive, more so than she had ever felt before. But there was something else. A presence. Not malevolent, not threatening, but watching. It was as if the forest had opened its heart to her, but in doing so, it had also exposed its vulnerability. The truth had unlocked something deep within Orialis, something that had been buried for centuries. And now, it was awake. As she moved deeper into the forest, the path before her split into two. To the left, the trees were bathed in soft, golden light, their leaves shimmering like the stars in a midnight sky. This path felt warm, inviting, as though it promised safety and peace. To the right, the path was dark, its branches twisted and gnarled, shrouded in shadows. The air was colder here, and the trees groaned softly as though burdened by something heavy, something old. Ira paused, her heart pounding in her chest. Both paths led deeper into the heart of the forest, but one felt like a path of healing, the other like a path of loss. Which path would she take? The voice of Orialis echoed in her mind once more. The forest has changed because of you, Ira. But remember, every choice has its consequences. The past cannot be undone, but the future can still be shaped. Choose wisely. Ira closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She thought of her twin, of the pain that had been locked away for so long, of the memories she had unlocked. And she thought of the forest, the life, the power, and the responsibility she now carried. She opened her eyes, looking down each path. And she knew. She had to face it all. With a final glance at the dark path to the right, Ira turned left, toward the golden light. The warmth of it wrapped around her like a protective embrace, and as she walked, she could feel the roots of the trees beneath her feet, guiding her, supporting her, urging her forward. The forest was alive, more alive than she had ever known it to be. And now, so was she. As Ira moved forward, the golden light ahead grew brighter, and the trees around her parted, revealing a clearing. At its center was a pool, its water shimmering with the same iridescent light that now filled the forest. The pool reflected the sky above, and Ira could see the stars twinkling in its depths. And standing at the edge of the pool was a figure. It was her twin. Ira stood frozen at the edge of the shimmering pool. Her twin brother, the one she had lost, the one who had disappeared in the storm, was standing before her. But was he really him? The same face, the same eyes, but there was something different. Something other. He was tall now, a figure carved from the same ethereal glow that bathed Orialis. His presence was undeniable, but there was something haunting in his expression. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, the past and the present collided. The memories that had been buried came flooding back in a rush: his laughter, the way he used to tease her, the bond they had shared as children before the storm tore them apart. The storm. The storm that had erased everything. Except the forest. He stood there, unmoving, his gaze locked onto hers, and yet he didn't speak. Ira's heart hammered in her chest. Tobias? He nodded slowly. It's me, Ira. The words were simple, but they sent a shiver through her. His voice had changed, deeper, more grounded, yet the same. He took a step toward her, but something about the way he moved felt detached, like he was no longer fully connected to the world she knew. Where have you been? Ira's voice trembled as she spoke. Her eyes stung with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not now. Not when the answers were so close. Tobias remained silent for a moment, his face filled with a mixture of sorrow and something darker. Something she couldn't quite place. I was lost, Ira. The storm took me, but it wasn't just the storm. Orialis. Orialis took me. It held me, kept me hidden, kept me safe in its roots. Ira felt a pang of guilt wash over her. But why? Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you find me? I couldn't. Orialis wouldn't let me. It needed me, just as it needs you now. Ira's head swam. Needs me? She echoed, a sharp edge of disbelief creeping into her voice. What are you talking about? Tobias took another step forward, this time closing the distance between them. You don't understand, Ira. You've been chosen, just like me. Orialis chose us, from the beginning. The storm was never random. It was part of the plan. Ira stepped back, shaking her head. The plan. What plan? Her brother's eyes softened. The plan to protect Orialis. To shield it from the world that would destroy it. The storm was meant to hide us, to keep us safe. But now the truth has been unlocked, and the forest has awakened. It will never go back to what it was. Ira's breath caught in her throat. So, you're saying Orialis did this? It took you, kept you hidden all these years. Tobias nodded solemnly. Yes. It saved me, but it also changed me. And now it's asking you to do the same. Do what? What do you want me to do? Ira's voice cracked, the weight of the conversation pushing down on her chest. Open the final door, Ira. The door you've already opened in your heart. Let Orialis truly live. Let the forest merge with the world beyond it. But you have to decide. The truth is both a gift and a curse. It's too much for one person to carry. Ira's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. The truth she had unlocked, the memories of the forest, the deep, living connection between herself and Orialis, it all made sense now. But Tobias's words, they were heavy. So heavy. The truth must be shared, Tobias continued, his voice almost pleading. You can't carry it alone. If you don't let it go, the forest will die with you. Ira felt the weight of the decision bearing down on her. The forest had changed, and now it was asking her to make the ultimate choice. To share its truth with the world, or to lock it away forever. She thought of everything she had seen her brother, the Lumina tree, the memories she had unlocked, the forest's heartbeat pulsing through her. She thought of the storm, the years of silence, the years of waiting. And she thought of her twin, the boy she had lost. "You can do this, Ira," Tobias's voice broke through her thoughts. "You can open the final door. The forest will live, and the world will change. But only if you do it together." Ira looked at him, the man who was once her twin, the man who had disappeared. He had come back, but not as he was. Not as the boy she had known. He had become something else, something connected to the forest, something bound to Orialis. The forest was asking her to choose to merge the past and the present, to share the truth, to let Orialis live. But could she? I don't know if I'm ready for this," Ira whispered, her voice filled with doubt. "You're stronger than you think," Tobias said, reaching out to her. His hand brushed hers, and in that moment, Ira felt the full weight of their shared connection. The forest. The memories. The sacrifice. Ira closed her eyes. She could feel the pulse of the lumina tree, the energy of Orialis coursing through her veins. The forest was alive, and it was waiting for her to make the final choice. Would she let the truth flow, allowing Orialis to reach the world beyond? Or would she lock it away, keeping its secrets forever hidden? Her hand clenched around the pendant, the warmth of the forest, of the truth, radiating from it. She could feel the memories of her brother, of the forest, swirling around her like a storm. And in that moment, Ira knew what she had to do. She had to let go. "I choose to share the truth," she said softly, her voice filled with resolve. "I will let Orialis live." With those words, the ground beneath her feet shook once more. The lumina tree's light brightened, its roots spreading far beyond the valley, connecting Orialis to the world beyond. The forest breathed, its heartbeat strong, its energy pulsing through the earth. The truth had been set free. And Orialis would never be the same. The air around Ira hummed with energy. She stood at the heart of the forest, watching as the roots of the lumina tree stretched and pulsed with life. The truth had been set free, and the forest had begun to wake. The ground beneath her feet trembled as the world around her shifted, expanding beyond what she had ever imagined. The lumina tree glowed brighter, its branches stretching toward the sky like hands reaching out to touch the stars. The once muted colors of Orialis now burned with vivid intensity, bright greens, deep blues, and fiery reds swirling in the air as the forest breathed with newfound life. It was as if the forest had shed its old skin, emerging from a long slumber into a new dawn. But with the awakening came a sense of urgency. The energy in the air was palpable, crackling like static electricity. Ira could feel it in her bones, in her veins, coursing through her. Orialis was alive, but it was too alive. The forest had remembered. It had revealed its truth, the memory of everything that had been hidden for centuries. But now, as the truth began to spread through the roots, the branches, and the earth itself, Ira realized that the forest was not just waking, it was changing. Adapting. The lyrican, still perched on her shoulder, chirped nervously. It was no longer the same cheerful creature it had been before. It too seemed to sense the shift in the air. The forest around them was becoming restless, as though it was not just breathing but pushing out, expanding into the world beyond its borders. The forest will not remain contained, the voice of Orialis whispered through her mind. It is alive, and it seeks to grow, to connect with the world beyond. But this growth comes at a cost. The truth cannot be held back, and neither can its power. Ira's heart pounded in her chest as the realization sank in. Orialis was no longer just a forest. It was becoming something more, something greater. And that power, that energy, was spilling out into the world. The ground beneath Ira's feet shifted again. The roots of the lumina tree began to stretch out farther, cracking the earth open as they searched for new places to take root. The air grew heavy with the power of the forest's awakening, and Ira could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. It was as if the forest was calling her to stay, to remain with it, to become one with it. But she couldn't stay. Not now. Ira turned, her eyes scanning the landscape around her. The path she had once followed was now obscured, blocked by the twisted roots of the tree, by the power of Orialis reaching out to the world. The forest was no longer confined to the valley, it was spreading, stretching, reaching into the farthest corners of the world. She had to leave. She had to find a way to stop it before it was too late. As Ira moved toward the edge of the valley, she noticed something strange, something she hadn't seen before. The trees that lined the forest were not just growing taller. They were changing. The bark of the trees shimmered with new colors, metallic hues of silver and gold that had never existed before. The leaves fluttered in the breeze, but they glowed now, lighting up the landscape like fireflies in the night. Ira's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just the forest waking, it was transforming. The very essence of Orialis was shifting, evolving, as though it were becoming something new. Something that no one had ever seen before. And then, as if the forest itself was answering her unspoken questions, a voice echoed through her mind. You have chosen, seeker. You have opened the door to the truth. But the truth is not without consequence. The world will not remain the same. Ira stopped dead in her tracks. The voice of Orialis was louder now, more insistent. It wasn't just speaking to her, it was speaking to everyone. The world was changing. The truth had been set free, and Orialis was expanding, reaching out to the world beyond its borders. It wasn't just the forest that would be affected, it was the whole world. And Ira realized that the consequences of her choice were far greater than she had ever imagined. The balance must be maintained, the voice of Orialis continued. But it is up to you, seeker, to guide it. You have unlocked the truth, but now you must carry it forward. The forest will grow, but it cannot do so without your guidance. The world will change, but it will change with you. It is time to decide what role you will play in the new world. Ira closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the forest's words pressing down on her. She had made the choice to release the truth. She had chosen to open the door, to let the forest remember. But she hadn't fully understood what that would mean. She hadn't known that the truth would spill out of the forest, that it would change everything. But it was too late to turn back now. She had opened the door, and the forest had awoken. Now, she had to decide what to do with it. Ira turned to face the lumina tree once more. Its light burned bright, casting long shadows across the valley. The roots continued to stretch out, and the branches seemed to reach for the sky. The forest was alive. It was growing. And it would not stop. She could feel the pull of the tree, the pull of Orialis, urging her to stay, to embrace the change, to become one with the forest. But she knew she couldn't. Not yet. Ira took a deep breath and turned away, stepping toward the path that now lay ahead of her. The forest, alive with energy, was stretching toward the world beyond. And Ira knew that her journey was far from over. She had unlocked the truth, but now she had to figure out how to carry it forward, how to guide the forest through its transformation. And as she walked, the world around her began to shift. The trees swayed in the wind, the ground beneath her feet hummed with energy, and the air was thick with the power of Orialis. Ira knew one thing for certain. Orialis had awakened. And now, the world would never be the same. The forest was no longer just a place. It was a living, breathing entity, its pulse thrumming with the energy of the truth that had been unleashed. Orialis had awoken, and the world around Ira had begun to change with it. The sky above her seemed different, somehow. The colors of the sunset were sharper, more vibrant. The air smelled of earth, of life, and of something else, something new, something that had never existed before. The roots of the lumina tree reached deep into the earth, spreading outward like veins through the forest. The very ground seemed to hum with energy, alive with the power that had been released. But Ira could feel it, too. The weight of it. The burden of the truth she had set free. She had chosen to open the door. To let Orialis remember. But what had she really done? What had she unleashed on the world? Ira walked through the shifting forest, the path before her unclear, its edges blurred by the ever-growing light of the lumina tree. The energy around her was thick, like a fog that wrapped around her, tugging at her skin, at her senses. It was as if the forest itself was reaching out to her, drawing her in, urging her to stay. But she couldn't. She had already made her choice. She had opened the door to Orialis, to the truth, and now she had to live with the consequences. "You have unlocked the truth," the voice of Orialis whispered through her mind. "But the world is not ready for it. It will change, but it will not be easy." The words echoed in her mind as she continued down the path. The trees around her seemed to move in time with the rhythm of the forest's pulse. The air hummed with energy, and the very ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, as though the earth was restless, uncertain. Ira paused, looking up at the sky. The stars were brighter now, but they flickered in a way that unsettled her. The world was different. Orialis had opened its doors, and now the world outside would be forced to confront the truth it had long buried. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound. A rustling in the trees, soft at first, but growing louder. Ira turned, her senses alert. She wasn't alone. From the shadows of the trees emerged a figure. Tall, cloaked in darkness, their presence looming. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face hidden beneath a hood, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Ira tensed, ready for a confrontation, but the figure raised their hands in peace. "I see you've come far, Seeker," the figure said, their voice deep and resonant. "You've unlocked the truth. You've awakened Orialis. But now, you must understand the cost of it." Ira's breath caught in her throat. "Who are you?" she demanded, stepping back. "What do you want?" The figure smiled beneath their hood, though the smile seemed distant, like a memory fading into the past. "I am a keeper," the figure replied, "a guardian of the forest's deepest secrets. And I have come to warn you." Ira felt the weight of their words. A keeper. She had heard the term before. The keepers were the ones who had protected Orialis, the ones who had kept its truth hidden for so long. But why had they come now? What did they want with her? "The forest is changing," the keeper continued, their voice a low murmur. "You've set it free, but the truth you've unlocked is not something the world is ready to face. Orialis will reach beyond its borders, and the world will be forced to confront what it has forgotten." Ira's mind raced. She had known this. She had felt it in the air, in the way the forest had shifted when she made her choice. But to hear it spoken aloud, to have it confirmed, it made the weight of her decision feel unbearable. "The truth is not a gift," the keeper said, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. "It is a curse. And now, you must choose. Will you guide Orialis into the world, or will you close the door once more?" Ira shook her head, her heart pounding in her chest. "I can't. I can't go back. I've opened the door. I've let the truth out. There's no turning back now." "That's where you're wrong, Seeker," the keeper said, their voice now tinged with sadness. "There is always a choice. But it may not be the one you want." The keeper stepped closer, their presence growing stronger. Ira could feel the weight of their power, the force of their ancient knowledge pressing down on her. "You must decide, Ira," the keeper said softly. "Orialis cannot live in the world outside without consequence. It will change everything. The world will change. And when it does, the door will close. And you will be left with nothing but the knowledge of what you have unleashed." Ira stood still, her mind racing. The world outside she had never truly considered what would happen if Orialis reached beyond its borders. The forest, the truth, the memories, it was all connected now. And if she let it grow, let it spread, it would change everything. The balance of nature, the order of the world, it would all be shattered. But could she stop it? Could she go back? She felt the pull of the forest, the call of Orialis. She felt the power of the truth she had unlocked, the energy that was now surging through the earth. It was too much to contain. It was too much to control. You have already made your choice, the keeper said, their voice gentle now. But the consequences of that choice are not yet clear. Orialis will change, and you must decide what role you will play in that change. Will you guide it? Or will you let it destroy everything? Ira looked out into the distance, the trees around her swaying with the rhythm of the forest's pulse. The air was thick with the power of Orialis, and she knew, deep in her heart, that there was no going back. The truth had been unlocked, the door had been opened, and now the world would change. But what role would she play in that change? The ground trembled beneath her feet once more, and the roots of the lumina tree stretched outward, reaching for the world beyond. The forest was waking, but so was something else. Something greater. Ira took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She had made her choice. Now, she had to live with it. And whatever came next, she would face it head on. The world was changing. Ira stood at the heart of Orialis, the lumina tree's radiant glow illuminating the vast expanse of the forest. The roots of the tree stretched deeper than ever, breaking the surface of the earth, and she could feel its energy pulsating through the air. Orialis was alive not just in the way it had been before, but in a new, wild way. The forest was no longer confined to its ancient boundaries. It was reaching outward, extending itself into the world beyond. And Ira could feel it. Her heart beat in time with the rhythm of the forest. Every step she took was echoed by the movement of the roots beneath her feet. But with each pulse of the earth, with each breath of the trees, something darker was beginning to stir. The power that had been unleashed was too much. Ira had opened the door, and now the truth was flowing like a river, washing over everything in its path. Orialis was no longer the quiet, secluded sanctuary it had once been. It was a force that couldn't be contained, a force that was reshaping the world. The trees around her groaned as if protesting the very energy that was pouring from them. The sky above had turned a deep crimson, and the once soft breeze now howled through the branches, carrying with it the scent of something unfamiliar, something wild. She could feel the change in her own body, too. The truth she had unlocked had altered her. The connection to Orialis was stronger than ever, but so was the weight of its burden. She could hear the forest whispering to her, feel its pulse in the air, in the ground, in her very soul. But there was a question she hadn't asked herself before: what would happen when the truth spread beyond Orialis? The forest, once a place of refuge, had now become something else. Something dangerous. Iro looked out over the vast expanse of trees, their trunks glowing faintly in the twilight. They stretched out as far as the eye could see, their roots winding deep into the earth. But beyond the forest, beyond the safety of the trees, the world was changing too. She could feel it. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy with the weight of something coming, something that had been set in motion the moment she had opened the door. And yet, she couldn't turn back. She had made her choice. She had chosen the truth, and now the world would have to face it. A voice broke through her thoughts. The world is changing, Ira. It was Tobias. Ira turned toward him, her twin, the one who had disappeared all those years ago. He had returned, but not as the person she had once known. He was part of Orialis, now part of the forest, part of its pulse. His presence was a constant reminder of the price of her choice. "You've opened the door," Tobias continued, stepping toward her, his face shadowed with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "But the door cannot be closed once it's opened. The world will change, and we cannot stop it." Ira's heart ached as she looked at him, seeing the distance between them now, the gulf that had opened with the truth. "I know," she said quietly, her voice filled with the weight of it. "But I didn't know it would be like this." "No one did," Tobias replied, his voice soft but steady. "But now we must live with it. We must live with the consequences of our actions. Orialis is not just a forest anymore. It's something more. It's something that will change everything." Ira turned back to the lumina tree. Its light had become brighter, more intense, as if it were feeding on the energy of the truth, on the memories that had been unlocked. The roots stretched farther, and she could feel them reaching out, pulling at the fabric of the world. The forest was growing, expanding, and it was starting to affect everything beyond its borders. She felt it in the air, in the way the wind shifted, in the way the stars flickered above. Orialis wasn't just alive, it was spreading, and the world beyond was beginning to feel its influence. "We can't control it, Ira," Tobias said, his voice now carrying a tone of urgency. "The forest is too strong. We've set something in motion, and now we need to decide how to handle it. You can't keep it contained forever." Ira nodded, her mind racing. She knew that Tobias was right. The forest was already changing, and the truth would soon be known to all. There was no turning back. But she still didn't know what to do. Could she let the truth spread, let the world see Orialis for what it truly was? Could she let it out, knowing that once it was out, there would be no controlling it? Or should she try to stop it, to contain the power of the forest before it reached too far? "You've already made your choice, Seeker," the voice of Orialis echoed in her mind once more, deep and resonant. "Now you must live with it. The truth will spread, and the world will change. But the question remains, will you guide it, or will you let it consume everything?" The voice was calm, almost indifferent, but there was an underlying sense of warning, a reminder that Ira could no longer control the flow of events. The forest had awoken, and it was beyond her control. Ira took a deep breath, her mind whirling with possibilities. She couldn't undo what she had done. She had opened the door, and now the truth was free. But how would she face the consequences? What was she supposed to do when the world began to change in ways she couldn't predict? The sound of rustling leaves interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to see the trees in the distance bending toward her, as though drawn to her presence. They were calling to her, urging her to come closer. But the deeper she went, the more intense the energy became. Orialis was pulling her in. "Come, seeker," the voice of the forest called once more, its tone both gentle and commanding. "Come, and let the truth unfold. The world beyond will soon know the truth of Orialis. Will you guide it, or will you stand aside?" Ira hesitated, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she had made. She could feel the forest pulling at her, beckoning her forward, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was to come. The truth had been set free. Now, she would have to face the consequences. The air was thick with the hum of energy, and the forest seemed to pulse with every breath that Ira took. Orialis was no longer just a place of memory, it had become something else. The truth had spread, and now it stretched far beyond the boundaries of the forest. Every leaf, every branch, every root was alive with a new power, a power that Ira had unleashed but could no longer control. The Lumina tree, still towering above her, radiated a fierce light, casting long shadows across the ground. Its roots reached deep into the earth, but they didn't stop there. They spread further, beyond the forest, beyond the valley. The very fabric of Orialis was tearing at the seams, and Ira could feel the weight of it all pressing down on her. The Lyrican, once a playful companion, was now silent, perched on her shoulder, its tiny body tense with the energy that crackled in the air. Even the creatures of the forest had grown still, watching her with wary eyes, as though they too sensed that the balance had been shattered. Ira stood at the edge of the clearing, gazing out over the vast expanse of trees that now seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. The world beyond the forest was still out there, but it felt closer now, as though the boundaries between Orialis and the rest of the world were thinning, fading away. "The truth has been set free," the voice of Orialis echoed in her mind, deep and resonant. "But with freedom comes change. And with change comes consequence." The voice was not a warning, but a statement of fact. Ira had known this. She had chosen to unlock the truth, to let the forest remember, but she hadn't realized how far-reaching those consequences would be. She had opened the door, and now she would have to walk through it. But she wasn't sure if she was ready for what lay on the other side. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned back to the Lumina tree, its radiant glow lighting up the entire valley. The tree's energy was overwhelming now, its power surging through the roots, through the earth, through her. Ira could feel the pull, the irresistible call to become one with the forest, to embrace its power and its truth. But she hesitated. She had already made her choice. She had already decided to open the door. But now that the truth was out, she was faced with a question she hadn't anticipated. What was she supposed to do with it? Orialis was changing, and the world was changing with it. But the question was it a change for the better? Ira's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden crackling sound. The earth beneath her feet trembled, and the roots of the lumina tree writhed, twisting and turning as if searching for something. The energy in the air grew heavier, more charged, and Ira felt it. Something was coming, something was stirring beneath the surface. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping slowly into the clearing. Tall and cloaked in robes made of shadows and light, the figure was unlike anything Ira had ever seen before. Their face was obscured by a hood, but their eyes glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light. "Seeker," the figure spoke, their voice deep and echoing, like the sound of ancient stone grinding against itself. "You have done what no one before you has dared to do. You have unlocked the truth of Orialis. But you must understand this is not without consequence." Ira took a step back, her heart racing. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. "I am one who has watched over Orialis for centuries," the figure replied, their voice calm and unwavering. "I am the one who has seen what happens when the truth is set free. And now, it is time for you to see it too." Ira's mind raced. The figure's words were heavy with meaning, but she didn't understand. What was happening to Orialis? What was happening to the world? The figure stepped forward, raising their hand, and Ira felt a strange pull, as though the very fabric of the forest was drawing her in. "Look," the figure commanded, and with a flick of their wrist, the air before them shimmered, rippling like water. In an instant, a vision appeared, hovering in the space between them. It was a vision of the world beyond Orialis. A world that was familiar, yet different. A world that was changing, just as Orialis was. Ira's breath caught in her throat as she saw it. The cities, once vibrant and full of life, were now covered in a layer of shadow. The air was thick with smoke and dust, the sky dim with clouds. The world was dying, slowly but surely, suffocating beneath the weight of its own existence. But Orialis was alive. It was thriving, its energy flowing through the earth, feeding the plants, the creatures, the very air itself. "This is the world you have chosen to awaken," the figure's voice echoed in her mind. "You have unlocked the truth, and now you must decide, will you let Orialis merge with the world outside? Or will you allow the world to destroy itself, as it has done for centuries?" The vision shifted. Ira saw herself standing before the lumina tree, but this time, the tree was no longer glowing with light. It was fading, its branches brittle and dying. The roots were retracting, pulling back into the earth as the forest withered and died. The world beyond Orialis was swallowing it whole. "You see," the figure said, their voice filled with sorrow. "You have awakened the truth, but with it comes the cost of merging Orialis with a dying world. The forest cannot thrive in a place that is dying. It cannot sustain itself on a world that is already decaying. Ira's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, the enormity of the choice before her. Orialis was alive, but could it survive in a world that was falling apart? Could the forest thrive when the world beyond it was dying? Tears welled up in Ira's eyes as she looked at the vision. She had made a choice, but now she had to face the consequences. The truth had been set free, and now the world was changing in ways she hadn't fully understood. "The world is dying, Ira," the figure whispered. "But it is not too late. You can still make a choice. You can guide Orialis to save it. You can restore the balance." Ira took a deep breath, her mind whirling. She had been given a choice, but it was a choice with consequences. She had opened the door to Orialis, and now she had to decide what to do with it. Could she save the world, or would she let Orialis remain separate, a haven for the truth, a place of healing but isolated from everything else? The forest was waiting. The world was waiting. And Ira knew, deep down, that whatever choice she made would change everything. The weight of Ira's decision pressed down on her chest as she stood before the vision of a dying world. The reality of what she had awakened, the truth of Orialis, was clearer than ever before. The energy of the forest hummed in the air, pulsating through her veins, and the truth she had set free now spread like wildfire, reaching beyond the confines of Orialis and into the world beyond. But with the awakening came a cost. The world, once vibrant and full of life, was on the brink of collapse. The cities, the fields, the skies, they were all suffocating under the weight of their own decay. And as Orialis thrived, the world outside seemed to wither, helpless against the pull of Orialis' life force. Ira's mind raced as she stood at the crossroads, unable to tear her gaze from the vision that hovered in the air before her. The forest was alive, but could it survive in a dying world? Could it save a world that seemed so far gone? And then, the voice of Orialis whispered once more in her mind. "The truth has been set free, seeker. But now you must decide what to do with it. The world will change, whether you guide it or not. The choice is yours." Ira closed her eyes, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision that hung in the air. The forest, Orialis, had chosen her, and now the world was asking her to choose in return. Should she allow Orialis to spread its roots, to merge with the world beyond and try to heal it? Or should she allow the forest to remain as it was, a sanctuary untouched by the rot of the outside world, but forever isolated? Ira could feel the pull of both options. She could feel the warmth of Orialis, the promise of life and healing. She could feel the world beyond, its decay, its desperation, its need for salvation. The choice before her was more than just a decision about Orialis, it was about the future of the world itself. The balance of life and death, of growth and decay, hung in the balance. As her thoughts swirled, the vision shifted once again. The landscape before her began to change, blurring, merging, until the image before her was no longer just a vision, it was a memory. She saw herself again, young, innocent, standing in a field with her twin. The storm was coming, but they didn't know it. They were laughing, chasing each other through the grass, the world full of light and hope. But the storm had torn that world apart, and in the aftermath, Ira had been left alone. And then the forest had come. Orialis had called her, had brought her here. The truth had been locked away for so long, hidden in the roots of the trees, waiting for her to unlock it. And now, the time had come to decide what to do with it. The vision of her past faded, and Ira was left standing in the clearing, surrounded by the shifting trees and the pulsing energy of Orialis. The world outside was still there, waiting for her choice. The truth is not just for you, Ira, the voice of Orialis spoke again. It is for the world. But you must choose. If you choose to let the world see Orialis, you must be ready for the consequences. If you choose to close the door again, you must live with the knowledge that you have kept the truth hidden from the world. Ira felt a pang of uncertainty. Could she really allow the world to see Orialis? Could she trust that the truth would heal what had been broken, that it would not destroy everything in its path? The world is already changing, the voice continued, but the change does not have to be destructive. It can be healing. You can guide the world toward a new beginning. But you must decide whether you are willing to bear that responsibility. The wind picked up again, rustling the leaves of the trees, and Ira felt the weight of the world pressing on her. The forest was no longer just a place, it was a force, a living, breathing entity that could no longer be ignored. It had opened its doors, and now the world would have to face the consequences of what had been set in motion. Ira looked at the lumina tree once more, its light radiating out into the darkness. It was bright, almost blinding, but the light was also fragile. It was a light that could easily be snuffed out by the weight of the world. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched the tree's glowing bark. The energy of Orialis surged through her, filling her with warmth, but also with fear. This was the moment. This was the choice. The world will remember, Seeker, the voice whispered, but you must decide whether it will remember the truth or the cost of it. Ira took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She felt the weight of the decision pressing on her, the responsibility of it. The world beyond was dying, and Orialis was alive. Could she allow the two to coexist? Could the forest heal the world, or would it consume it? Her twin's face flashed in her mind. Tobias, the one who had disappeared, the one who had been lost to the storm. He had made his choice, just as she had made hers. But now, the world needed them both. It needed Orialis, and it needed the truth. She couldn't let the world continue to suffer. She couldn't let it rot away while Orialis thrived in isolation. With that, Ira made her decision. I choose to guide the truth, she whispered, her voice steady with resolve. I choose to let Orialis heal the world. The moment the words left her lips, the ground beneath her feet shook. The lumina tree's light grew brighter, its roots stretching outward, breaking free of the earth. The trees around her swayed as though they were awakening from a long slumber, their branches reaching toward the sky. The energy of Orialis surged through the forest, spreading outward, reaching for the world beyond. And then, as the light of the lumina tree began to fade, the world outside began to change. The sky brightened, the air grew fresher, and the once dying cities began to feel the pull of Orialis energy. The world was waking up. Ira stood at the center of it all, her heart full of hope, and yet, full of fear. The truth had been set free, and now the world would have to face it. But Ira knew one thing: she was ready. The world was no longer the same. Ira stood at the heart of Orialis, the very ground beneath her feet trembling with the power of the forest's awakening. The air was thick with energy, crackling with life as the lumina tree's roots continued to stretch out into the world beyond. The light from the tree was brighter now, flooding the valley with its radiant glow, and the energy it radiated felt alive, almost as if the very forest itself had become sentient, aware of what was happening, of what had been set into motion. The trees around her had begun to change. Their trunks shimmered with new colors, glowing with an otherworldly light. The leaves rustled in the wind, but now they seemed to hum with a strange, unfamiliar rhythm, as if they were resonating with the pulse of the earth. Even the creatures of Orialis, once peaceful, harmonious, had begun to shift. Their eyes now gleamed with a new awareness, as if they were no longer just animals, but something more, something connected to the very essence of Orialis. And Ira. She could feel it too. The truth she had set free had changed her. The connection she felt with Orialis was stronger than ever, pulsing through her veins, filling her mind, her soul. She could hear the forest's whispers now, not just in her thoughts, but in her heart. The knowledge of the world, the past, the present, the future was there, deep inside her, waiting to be unlocked. And yet, there was something else: a fear. A fear that the truth might be too much, that the power of the forest might consume everything in its path. The world outside Orialis was still dying. She had seen it in the vision: the cities covered in shadows, the earth cracked and barren, the skies dark with smoke. The world beyond the forest was suffering, suffocating under the weight of its own destruction. And yet, Orialis had awakened. The energy that poured from the lumina tree was strong, but was it enough to save the world? Could Orialis truly heal what had been broken, or was it too late? As if on cue, the ground beneath Ira's feet trembled again, sending a shock wave through the earth. The trees around her groaned, their branches swaying wildly in the wind. The air grew heavier, charged with the energy of the forest, and Ira felt the pressure of it, felt the weight of Orialis' power pressing down on her. The forest was not just waking, it was expanding. Its energy was flooding into the world, but it was doing so violently, like a storm breaking through the dam. And then, she heard it. A voice. Seeker. The voice was deep, resonant, and it seemed to come from everywhere. Ira turned, but saw no one. The voice was in her mind, in her very bones. The truth you have unleashed is powerful, but it is not without cost. The world beyond Orialis is dying, yes. But the question remains: will you let the forest consume it, or will you guide it to heal? Ira's heart raced. The voice of Orialis was stronger now, more urgent. It felt as if the forest itself was asking her, pleading with her for an answer. The balance has been tipped, the voice continued, the door you opened will not close. But now, you must choose. Will you allow Orialis to merge with the world, to bring its healing energy to the dying lands? Or will you keep it contained, protecting it from the corruption of the outside world? Ira stood frozen, the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. She had made her choice. She had chosen to set the truth free, to let Orialis awaken. But now, the full extent of that choice was becoming clear. The forest was growing, but with that growth came the risk of consumption. Orialis had the power to heal, but it also had the power to destroy. The world outside her world was in peril, and Orialis could save it. But what if it couldn't? What if the energy of the forest was too strong? What if it overwhelmed everything it touched, turning the world into something it was never meant to be? It is your choice, Seeker, the voice of Orialis whispered again. The world will change, regardless of your decision. But you can still guide it. You can still choose what role Orialis will play in the future. Ira felt the weight of the words, the weight of the choice. She had opened the door. She had let the truth out. Now she had to face the consequences. Orialis was alive, but what kind of life would it lead? Would it heal the world, or would it consume it? Suddenly, a sound broke through the silence, a rustling in the trees. Ira turned, her eyes scanning the shifting branches, and then she saw him. Tobias. Her twin. But he was different now. His form seemed to flicker, as if he were part of the forest itself, his body merging with the very energy of Orialis. His eyes glowed with an intense, almost unnatural light, and his presence was overwhelming. He was no longer just a man, he was something more, something bound to the forest. Ira, Tobias's voice was filled with an unearthly resonance, echoing like the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. You have done it. You have awakened Orialis, and now it is time to face what you have brought into the world. Ira felt a pang of longing in her chest, a deep ache for the brother she had lost. But the brother she had known was gone, replaced by something else, something that was part of the forest, part of Orialis itself. You must choose, Ira, Tobias continued, his voice filled with a strange sadness. The world cannot survive as it is. Orialis is the answer, but it is also a threat. If you allow it to merge with the world, it will heal, but at a cost. It will consume everything. Ira's heart clenched as she listened to her twin. She had already made her decision to release the truth, but now she had to decide whether Orialis could truly heal the world or whether it would destroy it. Orialis has always been more than a forest, Tobias said softly. It is the balance. The world outside, the world of men, cannot continue to live as it has. Orialis was born from pain, from loss, from memory. and now it is time to decide, will you let it heal the world, or will you protect it, keeping it safe and contained? Ira felt a tear slip down her cheek, the weight of her decision crushing her. She could feel the pull of Orialis, feel the forest's energy coursing through her. But she knew that the choice was not just about Orialis, it was about the world. It was about what kind of future she wanted to create, and whether the truth could heal or destroy. The future was uncertain, and Ira knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But she had made her choice. The world was teetering on the edge of change. Ira stood at the boundary of Orialis, the forest that had become a living, breathing entity. The air was thick with energy, the power of Orialis reverberating through the ground, through the trees, through her very being. The Lumina tree, now fully awakened, stood tall, its roots stretching far beyond the valley, reaching into the unknown. Its light pulsed with an intensity that made the very earth tremble, as if the forest was waiting for something, waiting for her. The choice she had made had set everything in motion. She had opened the door to the truth, and now, Orialis was expanding, its influence spreading beyond the forest and into the world. The balance had shifted, and the world outside the cities, the people, the lands was feeling the consequences. But the question remained, what kind of change would it be? Ira could feel the weight of it all, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. The truth had been set free, and now she could see the consequences in the eyes of those around her, in the world outside. The people beyond Orialis were struggling, fighting against the tide of change that threatened to swallow them whole. They had not been prepared for this, for the truth that had been hidden for so long. And yet, she could feel the pull of Orialis, the promise of life and healing. The forest had the power to change the world, to heal it, to restore balance. But at what cost? Her twin brother, Tobias, stood beside her, his form still flickering with the energy of the forest, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He had become part of Orialis, just as she had. The connection between them was undeniable, but it was also suffocating. The weight of the forest's power, the truth it carried, was too much for one person to bear. "You've opened the door, Ira," Tobias said, his voice deep and filled with sorrow. "But now you must face the consequences. Orialis has awakened, and with it comes a responsibility you cannot escape." Ira turned to face him, her heart aching as she looked into his glowing eyes. She could feel the pain in him, the burden he carried, just as she carried it. The forest was alive, and it was changing everything. "I know," she whispered. "I've made my choice. But I don't know if I can live with it. The world is changing, and I don't know if it will survive." Tobias reached out to her, his hand warm against hers. "The world will change, but it will not die. Orialis has the power to heal, but it must be guided. The truth must be shared, but the world must be ready to receive it. And that is the choice you must make." The ground beneath them trembled once more, a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to shake the very earth. The air crackled with energy, and Ira could feel it. The forest was reaching out, stretching farther, pushing against the boundaries it had once known. The roots of the lumina tree were spreading, breaking through the earth, and the world beyond was beginning to feel the pull of Orialis. The world outside Orialis was changing. The cities, the lands, the people, they were beginning to feel the effects of the forest's awakening. The sky was darker now, the air thicker, charged with the energy of Orialis. The truth had been set free, and now the world was being reshaped by it. But Ira wasn't sure if it was the change she had hoped for. She stepped forward, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision that lay before her. The forest had been awakened, and now Orialis was alive, pulsing with energy, waiting for her to decide what would come next. The path ahead was unclear, but Ira knew that it was hers to walk. "The world will be different," Tobias said, his voice soft but filled with certainty. "But that does not mean it will be destroyed. You have the power to guide Orialis, to guide the change. But you must decide how." Ira paused, her eyes focused on the distant horizon. The world outside was still struggling, still caught in the grip of its own decay. But Orialis, the forest, the truth, it had the power to heal it, to save it. She had seen the visions, felt the pulse of the earth beneath her feet. Orialis was the key to the world's survival, but it would only survive if it was allowed to merge with the outside world. She had opened the door. But now, she had to decide whether she would step through it, or let it close. Ira turned to Tobias, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I can carry the weight of this responsibility." "You're not alone," Tobias said gently, stepping closer to her. "The forest is with you. The truth is with you. And the world will change, but it will change with you. The choice is yours, Ira." Ira looked out over the forest, the light of the lumina tree shining bright, illuminating the path ahead. The world outside was waiting, but so was Orialis. The truth had been set free, and now it was time to make the choice to let the world heal, or to protect Orialis, to keep it safe from the world outside. She had opened the door. Now, she had to choose whether to walk through it. The voice of Orialis spoke again, this time not in her mind, but in the very air around her. "The choice is yours, Seeker. The world will change. But you can guide it. You can decide what role Orialis will play in the future." Ira closed her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of it, the enormity of the decision that lay before her. The forest, the world, the truth, it was all connected, and now it was up to her to guide it. She stepped forward, her hand reaching out toward the lumina tree, toward Orialis. "I choose to guide it," she whispered, her voice steady, her resolve firm. "I choose to let Orialis heal the world." The moment the words left her lips, the earth trembled again, but this time, it was different. The roots of the lumina tree spread faster, farther, reaching out to the world beyond. The sky above began to clear, the clouds parting as the light of Orialis broke through. The air became lighter, fresher, and the world outside began to feel the pull of the forest's energy. The world was changing, but this time, it was changing for the better. Ira closed her eyes and breathed in the air, feeling the power of Orialis flow through her. She had made the choice, and now the future was hers to shape. The world would heal. And so would Orialis. The world was no longer the same. Orialis had awakened, and with it, the truth that had long been hidden. The forest's energy pulsed through the earth, coursing into the world beyond, like a heartbeat spreading out into the veins of the planet. The lumina tree stood at the center of it all, its light brighter than ever before, casting long shadows that stretched far beyond the borders of the forest. But this time, those shadows weren't of fear, they were of hope. The truth had been shared. And now, the world was changing. Ira stood at the edge of Orialis, looking out over the vast expanse of the forest that had become a living, breathing entity. The trees around her were different now, no longer just ancient beings, but vibrant, alive with an energy that pulsed through them. The air was thick with the hum of the forest's power, but now it was not the destructive energy she had feared. It was a healing force, a force that was spreading outward, reaching toward the world beyond. And as the forest grew, so too did the world outside. She could feel the pull of Orialis in the air, in her chest, in her very soul. It was a connection that went beyond the physical, a bond that tied her to the forest, to the truth she had unlocked. But it wasn't just the forest that had changed. The world beyond was feeling it too. The cities were no longer the bleak, decaying places she had seen in her vision. The skies were clearer, the air fresher. The people of the world were beginning to feel the shift, the change, and the healing that Orialis was bringing. It wasn't an easy change. It wasn't instantaneous. But it was happening. The energy of the forest was slowly reviving the earth, restoring balance to the natural world. The land that had once been barren was now beginning to bloom with life. Rivers that had once been dry were beginning to flow again. The forests, the fields, the mountains, all of it was waking up, responding to the pull of Orialis. And it was all thanks to the choice she had made. But even as the world began to heal, Ira knew that the journey was far from over. The world was changing, yes, but it would take time. It would take the collective effort of everyone, those who had once been blind to the truth, and those who had embraced it. Orialis had brought the truth into the world, but it was up to the people to accept it, to learn from it, and to shape a new future together. Ira turned to look at Tobias, who stood beside her, his presence still connected to Orialis. He had become a part of the forest, just as she had. But unlike the version of Tobias she had once known, this new version of him was more than just a man. He was a keeper of the truth, a guardian of the forest's memory. "You did it," Tobias said, his voice soft but filled with pride. "You've guided Orialis into the world. You've shown the world the truth, and now it's time for them to live with it." Ira nodded, her eyes filled with the weight of what had been accomplished, and what still needed to be done. "It's not over yet," she said quietly. "The world still needs to heal, and Orialis is only the beginning." but it's a beginning I can believe in. Tobias smiled, a smile that held both sadness and hope. You've given the world a chance, Ira. Now it's up to them to decide what to do with it. Ira looked out over the forest, her heart swelling with a mixture of emotions. There was hope in her heart, hope for the future. But there was also an undeniable sense of responsibility. The truth had been set free, and the world would never be the same again. But she was ready. She had chosen to guide the truth, to let Orialis heal the world. And now she would stand with it, watching as the world began to transform. The past was gone, and the future was unfolding before her. The Lumina tree, once just a beacon of life in the heart of the forest, now stood as a symbol of something much greater. It was a symbol of the truth, of the change that was happening, and of the responsibility they all carried. The truth had been shared, but now it was up to the world to embrace it, to walk forward into the light. As Ira stood there, a soft breeze began to blow through the trees, carrying with it the scent of earth and life. It was a gentle, welcoming breeze, one that spoke of new beginnings. The leaves rustled softly, as if the forest itself was whispering its thanks to her. She took a deep breath, feeling the energy of Orialis flow through her, through the earth, through the world. She had unlocked the truth, and now she was ready to help guide the world through its transformation. The world would heal. It would take time, and it would require effort. But with the power of Orialis, with the truth she had set free, there was hope. And for the first time in a long time, Ira truly believed that hope was enough. The light of the Lumina tree shone brighter than ever before, casting long, golden beams into the sky. The forest stretched out before her, a living, breathing entity. The truth had been set free. The world was changing. And in that moment, Ira knew that everything was as it should be.